Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if it's okay with you, I'd like to carry on with the really lovely viewer questions that you so very kindly submitted to this channel a few months back. And it has been my great pleasure to be able to go through them one at a time. And that brings us to the next question, which is from Benito Juárez. So hello, Benito. Thank you very much for your great question, which is, what's the first movie you remember loving? The first movie you remember being your favorite of all time? So thank you very much for this, Benito. I think for me, it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint exactly which is the so-called, for example, first film that I ever really thought I loved and considered my absolute favorites. So I could mention a few examples, and they all occurred, or my discovery of them occurred when I was fairly young, when I was maybe in my early teenage years or before. And so I've mentioned one before, which is the film by Akira Kurosawa, and it is called Yojimbo. I absolutely adore this film, and when I first discovered it, and if you know the film, you know it opens with this huge vista, this landscape of mountains, and right in front of the screen we have from behind the walking figure of the main character played by the legend that is Toshiro Mifune, and he looms larger than life like a mountain himself. He is a true legend, and he emerges, and then the titles appear, Yojimbo. Wow. And then the music with that wonderful staccato-like rhythm, it carries through the entire film, and what a ride that is. And so when I first discovered that on a type of VHS tape, I was so taken with it, and I fell in love with that world. And then that was my first, I think, introduction into the world of Kurosawa films, and my life was forever altered for the better, I would say. And I could say also that around that time I had also discovered other Kurosawa works. I remember I was so fortunate to have been able to get my hands on a VHS tape of the international release version. It was about 2 hours. The international release version of the film from 1980, also by Kurosawa, called Kagemusha. And this VHS tape was amazing, and I watched it over and over again, and it was sublime. It was so rich in color. It had this use of Japanese history, and at the time I was really into studying Japanese history in this particular period of Japanese history. So this was really fun and exciting for me, and so I enjoyed it very much, and became one of my favorite films from that period. And it further showed me along the way of my own Kurosawa film journey. Oh, that was a great time, that discovery of that film, Kagemusha, and the use of the primary colors, or not just primary colors, in fact, all the range of the colors that were used in that film, as well as the powerful story. What a powerful story. At the center of it is the performance, or performances, should I say, from the great, the one, the only, Tatsuya Nakadai. So that was another great experience for me growing up. I would also like to say, too, that at the time when I was young, I was so into, and I still am, but when I first discovered the books of Agatha Christie, the very famous mystery novelist, whose literature is so immense and so much fun. And part of that journey with Agatha Christie, and I've spoken about Agatha Christie a little bit before here, but part of that journey was the discovery of a lot of the works that were adapted into, say, film adaptations, or television television episodic serial adaptations and the like. And there are many of them that I was such a big fan of growing up as a kid. I lived a little bit in the United Kingdom, so there was a lot of that too being played on British television when I was living there, and on repeat viewing and rebroadcast, etc. When I was living in the United Kingdom, that was when, for example, the series Agatha Christie's Poirot was broadcast, and also I saw Miss Marple on BBC, and also there are other shows that I saw. Seven Dials Mystery I've spoken about. Why Didn't They Ask Evans I've spoken about. So I love this world of Agatha Christie. And one film in particular that I was able to discover somewhat early in my life was the film by Sidney Lumet, directed by Sidney Lumet, and it stars Albert Finney as Hercule Poirot, and it's called Murder on the Orient Express. Wow, the just the thrills that were around when I saw this film for the first time. I think it was broadcast on TV together with other great film adaptations like Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun. But Murder on the Orient Express, wow, that was amazing. It was shocking, and when I was watching it as a kid, there were some parts that were really scary, in fact. And there were some real quirky stylistic choices in terms of the visuals and some of the key sequences. But I love that story, and I still do. It's one of my favorite novels of Agatha Christie, and I love the adaptations. There have been many over the course of the years, including David Suchet adaptation, and also the recent film adaptation from Kenneth Branagh. And they're all very interesting in their own ways. They have their own specific strengths. But for me, it is the Sidney Lumet version from the early 1970s that is just such a powerhouse. It is like it is a beautiful thing, and it is rich, and it is alive, and it is playful. It is also, as I say, sometimes a little bit scary, a little bit disturbing, quite disturbing in a lot of places, but always keeping itself in line of the story and the style. And there's a type of celebratory nature to it. It is like a bubbly champagne or something like that, with bubbly champagne, and it's a nice meal watching. And I remember that was an early film that I saw, that was a film that I saw relatively early in my life too. And when I saw it, I was just watching it over and over and over and over again. I absolutely love that film, and I still do. And so that's probably another example. And I've been speaking about these films rather recently, but also the James Bond films. I was a huge fan of James Bond films, and I loved the James Bond films. And I think at the time, my favorite James Bond film was when I was growing up. It was either From Russia with Love or The Living Daylights. Now that I'm a little bit older, or right now, those films would still be in my top 5. But my list is somewhat changed over the years. And in fact, I really should, there was a great comment I received the other day asking if I would do a ranking of the James Bond films from my own perspective. And I think I'd like to do that one of these days, including the most recent one, which I was able to see in the theater the other day. So, the James Bond films were so exciting, and I love those, and those are films I saw over and over again. Also, I mentioned before, I was so fortunate to have been able to discover the films of Alfred Hitchcock very early in my life, and so Vertigo was always an early favorite. I think maybe when I was young, I think I was really gravitating towards Rear Window, and I've mentioned The Trouble with Harry, Rope, also Spellbound and Notorious and Rebecca. Those 3 films, I was just in awe. And as I said before, I was so fortunate to get those on VHS tape, and I would watch them over and over and over and over again. I was mesmerized, in particular when I was young. I think it was Rebecca and Spellbound. And I mentioned this before, but Agatha Christie, there's a little bit of an Agatha Christie type of quality to, in particular, Spellbound. So, and also the atmosphere and the creativity involved with filming Rebecca and some of the sequences there, the dream sequences at the start. Even back then, I was so taken with one of the very early dialogue sequences between the characters portrayed by Laurence Olivier and Joan Fontaine about her father painting a tree. And that story has always stuck with me. And, the idea being her father would paint the same tree over and over again. And he had a theory that if you loved something, that you should stick with it. And I found that to be such a that was such a great moment. And when I saw that in the film Rebecca on VHS tape, I never forgot it. And the way that Joan Fontaine delivers that particular part of the dialogue was so charming and so captivating to me. And then from there, I discovered other films, Hitchcock films, Suspicion, and I was able to watch other films as well, like like The Birds, and also Torn Curtain, somewhat later in his career, The Wrong Man, The Paradine Case, and some of his earlier works, The Lady Vanishes, The Man Who Knew Too Much, both versions, and the like. So that was an amazing time. And if I had to pick my absolute favorite, I don't know if at the time I had that consciously as my absolute favorite. Maybe the first time I was really becoming conscious of having a favorite film was maybe around the time, as I mentioned, that I discovered Yojimbo, the Kurosawa film from the 60s. But I think there were many films during that time when I was young and I would just gravitate towards. I remember too, and I mentioned this, when I first discovered the works of Stanley Kubrick and also the works of Robert Bresson. Pickpocket. I was so fortunate to have been able to get a copy on VHS of Pickpocket from my local library, I think, and it was my local library, or local video store, I forget where, but it was wow, that was such an experience to watch Pickpocket, and it had the burnt-in, the subtitle version. So, but it was amazing. That was such an amazing experience, and it opened my eyes toward to this world of Bresson, and a different way of looking at the world, and a different way of expressing oneself, a different type of filmmaking. I should say too that during this time, I would also be, I've mentioned on this channel my love for the films of John Carpenter, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the discovery of Big Trouble in Little China. And I love that film. And even when I see it, it's not, how should I put it? I know it was made in the mid-'80s, and I know, therefore, it was made many, many years ago. But to my eyes, it doesn't feel like an old movie. It always feels like a fresh movie, a film that was made just yesterday. And I'm just watching it, and I'm constantly reminded about how much I love this movie. And the way it gives me so much joy and happiness and thrills and excitement. This is the stuff. Why I love cinema. And this is the reason why. It's for examples like Big Trouble in Little China. I watch it and I am in awe and I am amazed by it. And I felt that way about Yojimbo when I saw it. I watched it and I was in awe of it. And I felt that way about Kagemusha. I was in awe of it. I mentioned Murder on the Orient Express. Wow. Spellbound Rebecca. Wow. Rear Window. Wow. Eraser. My goodness. All this stuff began to flood in. And so it was the beginning of a lot of stuff. And then around that time, perhaps things began to, coagulate, perhaps, around Kurosawa and Yojimbo. And then, of course, I discovered yet more things as I was getting older and I was a student. But maybe it was that sort of stuff that I could mention now. But I really should stop right now. Otherwise, it would be an endless thing. So I don't want to do that, but let me now turn the attention back to you, Benito, my dear friend. Thank you so much for this wonderful question, and I will very gladly ask this question to you and to others here who may be interested. What's the first movie you remember loving, the first movie you remember being your favorite of all time? Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.